What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. We are finally round to round 4 of the Six Nations. We've had a few new subscribers on the channel thanks to how well the Wales versus England breakdown video did. So welcome to everyone who's new to the channel. What we do in this series is I chuck a game of Rugby 20 on the background, playing as the two teams that are playing in real life. We go through each of the games and I talk about the teams that have been named in real life, who we think's doing well, who we think's going to do badly, and give a bit of a score prediction. The game is still pretty easy, even on the hardest difficulty, so I always play as the weakest team. So for this one, I will play as Italy. There's an awful lot to talk about this upcoming game. Italy versus Wales. Let's get this game kicked off. Alrighty, Tommaso Alan is going to get us kicked off and underway. So let's start off by talking about Wales. Of course, Wales had a really good win against England last week, and they are keeping their Grand Slam dreams alive. It's kind of mad that it's still coming. Of course, they had a very close win against Ireland and a very close win against Scotland. So those two games could have been up for 50-50. The first half of the England game could have gone either way, really. But that second half for Wales just looks super dominant. Like I did say in the intro, I did do a bit of a breakdown video for anyone that hasn't seen it of the Wales versus England game. It seems to have done really well. I'm so glad so many people seem to enjoy it, and it has brought a whole bunch of subscribers to the channel, so I'm sure there's a few new people checking out this preview videos this week. But basically in that video I went through and sort of broke down the key fundamentals of what I thought led to Wales winning that game. I think a few people took the question, the sort of hypothetical question around the game to heart, about asking, did Wales win or did England lose? I think some people genuinely thought I was asking the question of did Wales actually win, which of course wasn't what I was going for. I just wanted to break down the game a little bit, but so glad so many people enjoyed. So Wales go on to round 4, still looking for that Grand Slam. The team that has been announced, let's check it on screen. It's immensely strong. I did see a couple of comments in the last video talking about whether Wales might actually put on a bit of an experimental team, and to be honest, that's where I thought Wales were going to go. I thought maybe there was the opportunity to keep some key people out, try and avoid injuries, but of course Pivac hasn't gone for that. So starting off in that front row, Wyn Jones, Ken Owens, Tom Francis has been absolutely solid through this Six Nations, all three of them playing really well. Corey Hill comes in at number 4 over Adam Beard. Corey Hill, though, still a very good player, not a bad man to have in that lock position. Alan Wynne, of course, will take 5. Navidi, Tipuric, Faletau, all playing very good rugby at the minute. Faletau getting man of the match last game. Navidi and Tipuric doing extremely well. So that front 8-pack is as strong as we have seen it through this Six Nations so far. It's been really impressive to see how well that Wales team has gelled together, considering that they didn't have the best Autumn Nations Cup. They really seem to have pulled it together a lot in this Six Nations. Looking at the backs, Gareth Davis comes in at 9. Hardy has been released. I believe he picked up, was it an ankle injury? I can't remember off the top of my head now, in that England game. So he's gone. So Gareth Davis will take over at 9. So it'll be nice to see Gareth Davis play. Hopefully he can play a little bit better. I still have not been impressed with Gareth Davis in this Six Nations so far. We'll try and forget that little grubber kick he had against Ireland at the end of the game. What on earth that was. But hopefully he can do a little bit better against Italy. I'm sure he'll be looking for a couple of sniping runs along the way. Dan Bigger taking over at 10. Did see a couple of people calling for Sheedy to start this game, and I don't think it would have been a bad game for Sheedy to start. Of course, we've got to see now the sort of duality in this team, having the strong fly half like Dan Bigger on for about 60 minutes, and then the impact Sheedy has from the bench is so good, and it's worked through this. I did wonder whether they'd switch around, have Sheedy start, do the 60, and bring Dan Bigger on. You get a bit of information about on the team about which one is better from the bench, but Pivac wants to start with the set team, so he's going to keep it going that way around. Josh Adams taking over at 11. He didn't have a terrible game, actually. He managed to get his try from the crossfield kick. His defensive game was much better than I have seen Josh Adams play in a long time. That for me was always the negative side to Josh Adams. A great attacker, but not the best defender, but he really played much better in that England game. The 12-13 combo, still no Halaholo starting. They have gone for Jonathan Davis again at 12, who I don't think had maybe an average game you'd call it against that England team. I didn't see an awful lot from Jonathan Davis in that game, unfortunately. George North retains that 13 shirt. Rhys Zammit starting at 14. I think all of us in a red jersey will be praying for no injury to Zammit. He's been so instrumental in the Six Nations so far. And finally, Liam Williams in that 15 shirt. So across the board, 1 to 15, absolutely solid from Wales. They're not messing about. They're not taking Italy light-hearted at all. Pivac wants the most out of this team. He wants the most minutes from his top boys. We just got to hope for a lack of injury. In terms of sort of how I would look at this team, to be honest, I think this is the team. Italy haven't played perfectly in the Six Nations. I think it's fair to say, of course, they're missing an awful lot of players and are down on caps. So there's a couple of people missing from their team. So I think this could have maybe the team they could have experimented about with. To be honest, for me, maybe I would have looked at giving Rees-Zammit a bit more rest and just to ensure there's no injury there. I don't think there would have been anything wrong with putting Halaholo at 12, Jonathan Davis at 13 and moving north to 14. You could shift them all down one way and keep Rees-Zammit safe more than anything for that France game. I think he's going to have to play a big game, especially with potentially Villiers not playing in that France team anymore. So I think it could be a big call, but they've gone for the set team. I think it's strong. We'll quickly look at the replacements before we move on to the Italy team. Elliot D, Rhys Carey comes into the team. Leon Brown is actually playing good rugby at the minute, so nice to see him in. Jake Ball's going to be taking over that 19 position. We haven't seen a lot of Jake Ball from this tournament so far. Of course, we'll be moving to Australia relatively soon, so we probably won't be seeing him in a Wales jersey for too long. Aaron Wainwright, I'm sure, will get some time on. I don't actually know who he'll come on to replace in that game. Might come on for Navidi, might even come on for Faletau. Faletau playing relatively good rugby at the minute. There's a lot of carries being made and a lot of decent tackles from him. Maybe they'll want to keep him sort of fresh for that France game. Maybe they'll even do a 40 minutes. And if they can get the bonus try in early, maybe we'll see Wainwright come on earlier on. Lloyd Williams is going to come in, of course, because Hardy's no longer in the team. Sheedy at 22 is going to be, of course, a big replacement coming in. And finally, Halaholo, who I can't wait to see more of. Very, very impressed with Halaholo so far in this tournament. So across the board, this Wales 1-23 is solid. I'm expecting some real big rugby, of course. I think they know how tight this tournament could end up being. It's gone very different to how I thought in my original predictions. I'm going to look forward to going back after this tournament's done. Go back to those original predictions I did before teams were even named of who was going to come to the Six Nations, just to have a look at what happened in reality versus in my prediction. I think that'll be a fun video to make, just to see how wrong I've been. A lot of them have been about Wales, surprisingly, considering I am a Wales supporter. But I think Wales have played very well so far in terms of managing to get this team. The turnaround from the Autumn Nations Cup has done so well, and I think they know this Six Nations could end up being very tight to the end. I think between Wales and France coming into that final game, they could end up both be playing for a sort of Grand Slam area, so that'll be a big game. They know that if they lose that game, there's still a great chance to win this Six Nations if one of the teams can beat France along the way. France, of course, will have, alongside Wales, they still got to play England and Scotland, so there's a chance they could lose either of those two games, and then it can come down to things like bonus points. I think Wales will definitely be looking for a bonus point in this game, and I think a big thing of talking about in this game will be looking at how Wales will decide to play. So far in this tournament, they've played a lot of absorbing rugby. They seem to want to play without the ball an awful lot, take on the tackles and manage to make a couple of breakaways and some clever plays up the field to allow them to get points, allow them to get tries, whereas Italy feels like a team you can probably let loose a little bit more on so far in this tournament. We've seen a lot of points scored against Italy, unfortunately. I did think maybe they would be a little bit more defensively solid, so I think key players, people like Rees-Zammit, Josh Adams, George North, I think a lot of these boys will be looking for more tries, trying to get them in. I wouldn't even be surprised with the team and how it's playing, and if they can be aggressive rather than on the defensive, I don't think it's super insulting to say that Wales could be looking for that bonus point within the first half maybe, and then it'll be interesting to see who they come on. But something that does interest me in this Wales team is the way they've dedicated their subs. They've got an awful lot of forwards going in here, more than I was tended to expect. So they're obviously going to play a bit of a forward game. They're obviously still going to play that tackling game. But in that backfield, not a great deal of subs. Halaholo being the only man there in a central position. So, I mean, it looks to me like Liam Williams, Rees-Zammit and Josh Adams could be staying for the full 80 through that game. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point you could see Halaholo come on at 12. Jonathan Davis move to that 13 position to keep him on the field. George North move on to either wing and keep one of the wingers safe to avoid injury. That would probably be more if the 4 tries came very early in that first half. I don't think Pivac would want to risk people being injured, along with people like Dan Bigger. I'm sure he'll want to keep. As soon as you see any knocks in this game, I can see them definitely managing to hold that together. But I think it's going to be a superb game for Wales, and they're going to try and keep this alive. Grand Slam on the line. Not a lot of people probably will have expected it after how the Autumn Nations Cup gone, but they definitely seem to be improving. This has been the longest half of rugby ever. But certainly looking forward to seeing what this Wales team can produce, and I think the scoreline could be pretty telling. So in order to look at how we think this game is going to go, of course, we need to look at the Italian team and how they will shape up against this Wales team. So Italy, of course, didn't have the best game against Ireland, losing by 38 points. It's sort of going to go that way for the rest of the Six Nations, I feel. Having those big cap players missing and some of the big names missing from the team has truly hurt this Italian team. They are showing off in some areas. There are a couple of people that are able to do quite well. We've seen, of course, Canna and Garbisi being two of the standouts. They lost Stephen Varney going up against the Ireland team last week during the training session for it. So there's a couple of people that were missing, but overall they're not performing at the best. Moving forward to this Wales game, looking at the team, there's been a couple of big changes here. So Franco Smith, first of all, with his front row. Normally he likes to put on his sort of second choice props really to get the game started off, and then we'll move on to putting on his big boys later in that second half. He's done a bit of a switch up for this one, so Fischetti and Zalocci both starting the game along with Bigi in that number 2 shirt at hooker, which we're so used to seeing him do. Canoni and Ceci will be going in at lock. I mean, both of them have played relatively well through the tournament. They're just struggling to deal with a lot of the pressure that comes from the bigger teams applying on them. Sebastian Negri, Johan Meyer and Lamaro will all be taking that 6, 7, 8 shirt. That's a bit of a partnership they really like having. Johan Meyer, of course, had a very good game against Ireland. Actually, I did see in a couple of people's different videos about their team of the weeks, they did actually have Johan Meyer in there as their choice number 7, but for me it was Will Connors through and through. But 1 to 8, looking stronger than usual than we've got to see so far in the Six Nations, so it'll be interesting to see how they cope with some of the Wales pressure they'll be coming in. I don't know if it's going to be a bit different because the Wales team has played a little bit more defensively than aggressive throughout the Six Nations so far, but I think this will be the game they might open up a little bit on. Looking at the back, Stephen Varney coming back in at 9, which is nice to see him back in. Of course, did have that injury in the warm-up leading into that Ireland game. I wasn't sure if he would come back, so nice to see him back in. Paolo Garbisi, a bit of a standout in this team, as we all agree, doing very, very well. Garbisi just needs to work on that passing game a little bit, get a little bit fed up, I think, maybe of being the one-man army, but he's still doing okay. It's nice to see him playing a good game. Montano Ioane, of course, still doing well in attack. Defensively, though, beginning to see a few issues with his defensive. He seems to be the guy that just doesn't seem to tackle that final man that leads to a try on a couple of occasions. Hopefully he can step up his defensive game. Canna and Brex in centre together, doing very well in that little centre partnership. Ignacio Brex not really living up to the hype I was expecting to see him in terms of defensive capabilities. Canna playing very well, but Brex seems to have been much more aggressive than I expected him to be. Thought he was going to be a much more defensive player, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Sporandio is out. I believe he has a head injury he's picked up along the way, so Mattia Bellini will be coming on that right wing. He's not a bad player to add in at all. He's a bit of a standout winger for this Italian team, so hopefully we get to see a little bit of him opening up the game a little bit. And I do like Bellini. I do think he plays well. And then finally, of course, Trula in that backfield. I think it's coming at a bit of a sad time for Bellini to have been able to mend himself, only for Sporandio to fall out. Personally, I would probably have had Sporandio at that fullback had he been available and had Bellini on that wing. So 1 to 15, it's stronger than usual, I think would be the call I would say so far in the Six Nations anyway. It seems to be the strongest starting 15 they're putting out. But whether it'll be able to hold up against Wales, not 100% sure. Moving on to the replacements, of course, a couple of different people coming in here because they seem to have started with a bit of a stronger team in the starting 15. So Fabiani comes in at number 16, Lavotti still at 17, and Riccioni at 18. So we'll see them come on. He does like his 50-55 minute switch over in the Italian team, so I won't think it'll be too long into that second half before we see some front row replacements. Lazzaroni going on to the bench. I think normally they try and have Canone on the bench rather than Lazzaroni. There's been a bit of a switch there. Interesting to see how they're going to mix and match that one. Mbanda will, of course, come on in that second half. I just feel like he's not getting a lot of game time. I think he's a bit of a class player, but he's not been allowed to show an awful lot off. They do like their 6-7-8 combination at the minute. They don't want to mess it up too much. Violi comes back in at scrum half, which looking forward to seeing a bit more from him. I did actually think Callum Brayley had a relatively decent game, given the short notice that he had to come in at starting scrum half. half, but nice to see Violi coming back in. Federico Mori, of course, will come on later in that game as well. Actually, didn't think he had a terrible game in that Ireland game. He just came on into a bit of a danger fest in that game, unfortunate for him. And a new person coming in here, Edoardo Padovani. There's a name I don't feel like I've seen in a long time. And one question that I do have here that some people may be able to answer, I know we have a couple of Italian fans in the subscriber list, is why is Padovani on the bench and not starting instead of Trula? I would have Padovani down as a massively more influential fullback than Trula. Maybe lack of game time, they don't want to sort of rush him onto that pitch, but in all honesty, I think it's worth having Padovani starting at that 15 shirt and bring on Trula later. Maybe it would absorb some of the damage. Maybe Trula, he is quick, Trula, he is a fast player. I would maybe like to see him come on in the second half when people are a bit more tired, and you'd be able to see Trula maybe open up a little bit. He's definitely doing okay in attack, but to me his fullback defensive work is pretty poor. So I would pretty much have preferred to have seen Padovani starting in that fullback position. But across the board, 1 to 23, it's about the best we can expect from the Italian team. Will they go on to win? I think it'd be very hard to call an Italian win here. Personally, looking at the teams, the Wales attack is looking much more aggressive, and there's some big names in this Wales team coming in for this. Really surprised Pivac hasn't tried to go a little bit more experimental. I did see a press conference with him when he has said, we're not looking to throw the ball around, we're not looking to mess about till we've secured the game. So I think they're going to be very formulaic in trying to get the 4 tries, get the bonus point, and then after that is when we'll see the game open up a little bit. So I can see a lot of forward work happening in that first half and moving into the backs later, maybe into that second half. But for me personally, I think between the two teams, prediction time for me has got to be a Wales win. Wales look absolutely dominant so far, and I think going into this game, Italy could really struggle how they have done so far in the Six Nations. So I'm going to say a Wales win. I think it could be quite big. I'm going to say Wales to win by 44. I think I can see this Italian team getting very fatigued later in the game, and Wales have so many attacking options. I'm going to call it's going to be a big win. So that's going to be my prediction for the game. But what do you guys think? Make sure you drop it down in the comments who you think's going to win, what you think the score difference will be. It's always interesting hearing people's announcements. I cannot wait for round 4 to start. I hope you've all enjoyed this video today, guys. I will be doing these for the rest of the game, so make sure you subscribe to the channel just to keep up to date with all the videos as they're coming out. I'll see you all next time, guys. Bye-bye.